like to call this meeting to order. If everyone could take their seats, we'd like to get started. Today we're meeting to hear a number of technical cleanup budget trailer bills. We don't have a lot of time. The floor session is going to begin at 2, and I'd like to get us back onto the floor as close to that time as possible. I've heard a lot of feedback from members on both sides of the aisle, and I myself wanted to make sure that we have more time to vet these trailer bills, even when they're small or technical changes. It's nice to be able to bring it forward into this committee. These bills are not necessary to implement the budget as we've intended and reflect, they are necessary to implement the budget. They reflect the hard work of staff on both sides of the aisle in a bicameral way, working on a lot of these issues, and a lot of stakeholders have been involved. Some of these bills provide clarification and further refinement to some of the most controversial parts of the budget: public safety realignment, state responsibility area fire fees, which we are not going to take up today, and the reform of redevelopment. We've already litigated all of these issues. We've had long hearings on them, so I'm asking members not to bring up the arguments about the underlying bills, because that's not what this hearing is about. This hearing is really narrowly focused on the amendments that are out there. We have 27 members of this committee. We have to compete with the floor and other things, so we just can't revisit all of the issues. With that, I want to get started. Our first bill is SB 4, which is the follow-up to public safety realignment, in particular the funding structures that we enacted in AB 118. What this bill is, it's a follow-up vehicle that includes technical and other statutory changes necessary to implement the 2011 public safety realignment. Most of the content of this bill is a result of feedback from counties and other local stakeholders. As you know, the administration has been working with CSAC nonstop all year to make this transition work. As a result, the bill contains several statutory changes to help counties implement the first year of public safety realignment. Among other changes, I'll go through a couple of quick things, and I'm going to have some statements and have finance walk us through it. But it makes changes to the accounting within realignment, including clarity in viewing what amounts are not distributed and permitting funds within the newly created undistributed account to be used to reimburse the general fund. It inserts reporting requirements to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee on or before May 30, 2012 regarding the state of the local revenue fund, including estimated amounts used to reimburse the state. It makes various changes related to specific program functions, refining realignment statute to conform to the intent of the 2011 realignment, including accurate accounting for administrative expenses, specifying that funds can be used to meet the non-federal share requirements and to meet costs for the specified foster care purposes, including the Title 4E waiver costs, allowing for contracting back to the state for functions that counties may choose this option for, including the Medi-Cal drug treatment and agency adoptions, and creation of a CalWORKs maintenance of effort requirement in the sub-account that enables proportionate funding, easing the implementation across counties that may experience disparate ratios of spending in this program. Additionally, and importantly, it expresses our intent that further legislation enacted to implement realignment shall address funding necessary and to sufficiently fund our child welfare services and foster care programs. With that, I want to next have opening comments from my vice chair, and again remind everyone that our focus today is on the amendments, not the underlying bills. Mr. Vice Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I particularly want to thank you and the Speaker for that we will have a hearing. This legislature has gotten the habit of not having hearings and not having public input and comments, and so this is very welcome, and particularly appreciate that our staff have had the opportunity to evaluate and review these proposals. I would, although, have to offer that it's not what I would call a meaningful opportunity for public input. There's no time. We're jamming this into just a very, very few minutes. And these should require hours of deliberation and hours of public input. But we do not have that luxury right now. We at least do have an opportunity for someone to come up for 2 minutes and say whatever they will say, and that is a plus. I'm going to be very reluctant to ask for votes in favor of any of these measures related to realignment because I think they're hastily conceived, ill-founded, and are going to result, particularly the public safety realignment, in absolute disasters for the citizens of California. The rest of realignment will be very problematic, if not disastrous, for the counties of California. And a lot more discussion and analysis should have occurred for that. And in fact, to whatever degree we did effect a realignment, it should have been done incrementally. That said, we are going to confine our discussions mostly to the amendments today, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of being expeditious. And I thank you for the privilege of having the opportunity to have a hearing.
Thank you. First, if we could call the roll, please.
Blumenfield.
Here.
Nielsen.
Here.
Alejo. Allen. Berryhill. Bonilla. Brownlee. Buchanan. Butler. Cedillo. Chesbro. Dickinson. Buer. Gordon. Harkey. Huffman. Jeffries. Jones. Logue. Mansour. Mitchell. Monning. Morrell. Nastandi. Swanson. Valadeo. Wagner.
Thank you. So if I could ask Michael Cohen from the Department of Finance to walk us through this or give us his statement on this bill.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Michael Cohen with the Department of Finance. I think you hit the highlight provisions well, so for in the interest of time, I won't go over those again. Just as a general statement, this does reflect input from the counties and various county interested parties, the State Controller's Office, legislative staff, as well as administrative staff in taking a look at really just the technical details to make realignment work smoothly in 2011-12. We will have further opportunities next year to talk about sort of the ongoing framework for realignment in 2012-13 and going forward. So this bill is really focused on 2011-12.
Thank you. Do we have any witnesses that wish to speak in favor of the technical amendments to this bill? Again, not on the underlying bill, but on the bill before us. You state your name.
Kelly Brooks. I'm with the California State Association of Counties. We did provide input to the amendments before you. We're supportive of the product, and we do think it makes it technically workable for the counties to be able to implement realignment in 2011-12.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses wish to speak in opposition? Okay. Are there any member comments? Ms. Mitchell.
My goodness. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to, as Chair of Budget Sub 1, restate my intention and my concern and commitment to really monitoring the realignment of child welfare services. And I continue to have a deep concern about the base level of funding, the fact that it really is inadequate based on what we know and what we don't know, which will very likely impact child welfare services in the future. We know that the base funding currently, A, falls short, B, won't cover things like the AB 12 implementation, the expansion of foster care coverage past 18, and whatever, additional federal or state laws that come or lawsuits or whatever the case may be. But, I am clear, as all of us in California are concerned about public safety and want the public safety realignment process to be whole and well. I want to make sure that we continue to also have the same level of commitment to children in the child welfare services system in this realignment process, and acknowledge the fact that we have already sort of cut up our nose to spite our face with regard to the level of funding that's included, and want to really make sure that the intent language that is included in these amendments, that we hold true to it and make sure that we absolutely guarantee that services that are critical to children in California are afforded to them. So that, as Sub 1 Chair, I just want you to know that I'm going to continue to make sure that we hold true to the intent language that's included in in today's amendments.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then, I'm sorry, was there another question I missed? No. Then this bill is, do we need to do a roll call on this? Okay. We already asked for opposition. Okay, I don't think we need a Democratic roll call. It'll be but we can have a Republican roll call. No, or we'll just do it. We want to do a roll call. Bill's been moved and seconded, so we'll do a. Okay, B roll call on this?
No.
Okay, this is a B roll call. Okay. This, just to clarify, because we don't always do this in the Budget Committee, this is always done in approps, but in these type of bills we do it. A roll call means both Democrats and Republicans are in agreement. B roll call means the Democrats have agreed and the Republicans are no on it, and otherwise we'll call it separately. And if anybody wishes to be off or no, they can indicate to me, or we can call for a roll at that time. And that's at any member's discretion to change it to that. Okay, we'll move to the next bill, which is the AB 109 follow-up, which okay. This bill continues the implementation of the 2011 public safety realignment, which moved the responsibility for custody of certain low-level felons, parolees, and juveniles from the state to the counties. Additionally, this bill reflects the input of local public safety, counties, and other stakeholders, and adds more specifically on current statutes regarding state and local custody and post-release programs. As a result, this bill includes several provisions to clarify and define elements of these new programs. Specifically, what these amendments do: provide clarification on which felonies are subject to imprisonment in a county jail and which are subject to imprisonment in state prison, provide clarification on how custody credits shall be earned and applied toward release, provide clarification as to which offenders are eligible for post-release community supervision, specify that persons imprisoned for committing a violent or serious felony or who are required to register as a sex offender are not eligible for early release from supervision. That's the basic thrust of it. Finance, would you like to comment or add to that?
Again, a very good summary. We work closely with law enforcement as well as other interested parties in making sure AB 109 is an effective implementation as we get to October 1st.
Okay, Mr. Nielsen.
I would only submit that sadly all of that work has been a failure. To demonstrate how hastily and ill-conceived this is, by my count, this is the 6th or the 7th fix of AB 109 since it passed. That shows that this is already a failure. And it cannot be fixed. It can only be repealed if we are to ensure justice and people protecting the public. As to the amendments, I particularly object now to the extra credits that inmates and parolees are going to be receiving. And I will submit those are unearned credits. They will not have to, as they never have before, since the first credits bill passed in the 80s, have to earn those credits. This is an easy out, a quick out, a way to ignore justice and public safety and try to focus on getting people out of prison.
Okay, thank you. Before we have additional member comments, is there anyone who wishes to witnesses in favor of this bill? Please come forward now.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Elizabeth Howard Espinosa on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. As my colleague indicated before, we view this as a bill that confers the appropriate authority and makes the necessary refinements in order for counties to manage the populations that will be coming to us starting October 1st. And we appreciate the opportunity to provide input. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who witnesses who wishes to speak
Chairman,
in opposition?
if I may on that point.
Please, go ahead.
I must admonish the counties, and you do not represent, ma'am, the counties that I am privileged to serve in their sentiments related to this wonderful bill. And with that said, when you counties start coming back to our committees shortly, complaining so bitterly about the mess and havoc, you're not going to receive much sympathy from me, the counties yourselves who bought into this bad deal. You will find an absolute resolve to repeal and make some changes in realignment that will work, though.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the comments. So again, I want to just ask everyone to try to focus on the amendments themselves, the fixes. Whether I know we have big differences of opinion as to whether we think the underlying bill was good or bad, and the question is whether these amendments, in the case if you believe it was a bad bill, make it a little less bad, or in the case of if you think it was a good bill, make it a little bit better. That's the scope of what we're really looking at. But with that, I want to offer any witnesses in opposition to formally come forward at this point? Seeing none, bill's been moved and properly seconded. And Republicans know this bill is out on a B roll call. Okay. Next bill is the SB 6. This is a pretty straightforward bill to make technical changes to the trigger provisions in the budget. It makes changes to the provisions of the education budget trailer bill to delay the implementation date of the community college student fee increase of $10 per unit from the winter term to the summer term of 2012 in the calendar year in the event that the trigger reductions are made operative by January 1, 2012. Sort of a common sense measure to keep them able to be able to deal with not having to make the change in the middle of the term. The bill also makes changes to the provision of the budget trailer bill related to implementing mid-year revisions to the Budget Act, stating that if the Director of Finance proposes to reduce an item of appropriation pursuant to the determination of the higher revenue forecast, that the Director shall do both of the following. One, by December 9, 2011, make every effort to notify the Chief Clerk of the Assembly and the Secretary of the Senate of the specific reductions that the Director proposes to make. And two, at least 10 days before implementing a reduction, consult with the Speaker of the Assembly and the Senate pro tem about two things. One, the amount of reduction and projected revenue shortfall justifying the reduction, and two, statutory changes that will provide alternative budget solutions to the reductions. Department of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Department of Finance is opposed to this bill. First of all, we think it's unnecessary. There haven't been any substantial changes since the budget enactment that set up the trigger mechanism. Second, and more importantly, we are about to go out to market for our annual cash flow borrowing revenue anticipation notes. The cash flows that are within that borrowing proposal rely on the $4 billion of higher revenues, but investors are able to know exactly what the trigger reductions would happen if, unfortunately, we don't reach that target, and that's a key component of this budget package. So any proposed changes to that package we feel is unwarranted, and therefore we're opposed to the bill.
Thank you. Are there any witnesses who wish to speak in favor of this bill? Please come forward. We'll have 2 minutes of overall testimony, and then if we have additional people, we'll have name and affiliation. Go ahead.
Chairman, members, Terry Brennan on behalf of SEIU California in support of this bill. Despite the opposition from finance, this bill does nothing to weaken the authority of the director to actually make the cuts listed in the trigger mechanism in the budget you adopted. All this does is change the timeline and require, prior to those cuts being made, you be notified by December 9th as to which cuts are going to be proposed by the Department of Finance, and then they consult with the Speaker and the pro tem as to which cuts have been chosen and whether there are alternatives. It creates a timeline whereby the legislature has an opportunity to act before any automatic cuts are made and make alternative cuts to reach the same budgetary goals. We think this is a simple way to allow legislative and public input into this discussion. It doesn't alter the scheme you have to make and the numbers you have to hit. With reference to the bond markets, if you read that story that was in the recently released about the Treasurer's position, the Standard & Poor's analysts suggest that this will not alter the bond rating of California and have very little impact because of the legislature and the governor's ability to make mid-year cuts already if you chose. So we don't think it has any impact on that. And as a matter of fact, the Treasurer's office has already had to alter their bond offering statement to include the possibility of passage of this bill. So if there's any impact, it's already been impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses wish to come forward on support?
Chair, Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Dan Troy on behalf of the California Community College Chancellor's Office. We're supportive of the provision of the bill that would delay the trigger fee increase from the winter term to summer. We've heard from our colleges that a December 15th trigger does not provide adequate notice to effectively implement the fee increase. So in order to ease the administrative burden on colleges and hardship and consternation among students, we've requested that that fee increase be pushed back to the summer. So we appreciate support for that issue.
Great, thank you.
Teresa Tenna with the Community College League of California, and for the same reasons my colleague Dan Troy articulated, we are in support of this bill for the fee increase delay that it provides. It would be very disruptive for students in the middle of the academic year to increase the fees. It could cause some students to have to unnecessarily drop because they're not able to pay the increased fee in the middle of the quarter, not to mention hugely disruptive for financial aid. And, of course, administrative practices to implement this fee increase in the middle of the year. And so for that reason, we're in support.
Thank you.
Jonathan Lightman on behalf of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges for the reasons stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any witnesses wish to come forward in opposition? Seeing none, are there any member questions or comments? Mr. Nestande, and then...
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If there was a delay in the fee, doesn't that create a hole in the budget then? I think it's $30 million that is going to be there because they're delaying it from the fall to the spring. So how do we plug that hole then?
Can you direct your question to the Department of Finance?
Basically, instead of having the fee revenues, it would become a one-time cut to the community colleges, and so they would need to, on a college-by-college basis, have to implement cuts that would be intended to be of a one-time nature, and the community colleges requested this change, basically asking that they'd prefer to make the cuts as opposed to deal with the implementation challenges that you just heard.
Ms. Harkey, followed by Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you. I like to listen to DOF and the Treasurer when they're trying to access the bond market because that is their job. That's what they do. And as much as I understand these cuts have been, or these triggers are a problem, they were a problem for us too, which is why we didn't vote to support them. But that being said, this is the majority budget, and it has been shopped at Wall Street, and the bonds are in the process of being procured. We did a little gap funding because of the chaos in the U.S. economy situation, and now we're now we're pending on, or we're planning on creating like chaos here in our state. I think that in order to keep stability and to keep our credit rating, we need to keep with a program. If this program is the one that the majority party chose, we need to stick with it. I know it's painful. I know it creates some problems, but I really think that the uncertainty in this state, just like there was uncertainty when we couldn't get the debt limit increased, creates a lot more problems and a lot more, it will cost us more in our borrowing. So I would prefer that we stay the course, work with the colleges as best we can, but we probably need to stay the course. Thank you.
Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment. I'm delighted to have something with the Department of Finance that I agree on. That's the highlight of the hearing today, that we agree on something, and that's a negative. The trigger mechanism that's being discussed here, I would argue, does not represent either participatory democracy unless the citizens are going to be disposed to referend some of this bad budget package and its following bills, and I expect at least one or two will be referended. Nor is it representative government. The Director of Finance reports now to the pro tem and the Speaker, and I guess that's good, and consults with on alternatives, which could be tax increases. But that's it. No member of the majority party or the minority party have any opportunity then for such consultation and proposal of alternatives in the formal trigger mechanism. In the process, maybe we can have some input, maybe. But in the trigger mechanism, this is an egregious flaw.
Any other comments? I guess we don't have a formal mechanism, but if it does come down to it, and part of the point of this bill is for us to get the notice about it, we may wish to meet as a group and rejigger the trigger, so to speak. But we have to cross that bridge when we get to it, and we have to be able to know that that bridge is in front of us in order to get to it. With that, if there are no other comments, the bill has been. Do I have a motion on this bill? It's been moved and properly seconded. I believe it's out on a B roll call, correct, Mr. Nielsen? It's out on a B roll call. We are not going to cover the state responsibility SB 7X. That one was, there were a lot of questions raised in the Senate, and it's been tabled over there, and there needs to be a lot of additional work that's done on it. So rather than take the time of this committee going through that bill, we'll see what happens with that, and if need be, have a hearing on a revised provision should it come before us.
Mr. Chairman, I'm really disappointed we're not going to be able to put a stake in it.
So noted. Okay, moving on to the next bill, and the next bill is SB 8, which is the concerns redevelopment adjustments. This is one of two bills related to redevelopment. It makes technical changes to the previous realignment bills. Given the complexities of AB 26 and AB 27, the bills that eliminated existing redevelopment and instituted a new program, it's inevitable that there will be corrective steps that are needed to be taken. The measures we adopted as part of the budget retained local redevelopment, but reduced state support so the schools could benefit. This bill ensures that all communities are given the opportunity to participate in the new program. As you know, communities make a payment under the new program, but this bill eases the financial burden of making the first remittance payment by allowing communities to be repaid monies used to make the payment. It also allows RDAs to extend their repayment to low and moderate income housing funds that are borrowed over the last 2 years. The bill also helps affordable housing by ensuring that current assets on deposit at this low and moderate income housing fund are used for housing programs by cities and counties in the event that the RDA goes away. Finally, the bill addresses specific problems that have become apparent, especially given the Supreme Court stay of AB 26 and AB 27, including third-party credit supports, composition of oversight boards, RDAs that have reached their increment cap, and particular debt structures. With that, Department of Finance, do you have additional comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do oppose this measure, given that the two redevelopment bills are pending before the state Supreme Court, and the court has told us we'll have a decision by January 15th at the latest. We feel that any of these discussions regarding making changes to the bills that were passed in June is premature, and that we really don't know what the baseline is we're working from, and so it makes sense for us to wait and hear from the court before moving forward with any changes.
Okay. Is there any witnesses that wish to speak in favor of this bill?
Mr. Chairman, Cliff Berg here on behalf of J.P. Morgan Chase. Just very briefly, there are certain urgent problems out there that cannot wait till January and need to be dealt with this November. The provision of this bill related to letters of credit. There are situations where letters of credit will expire in November, and if the current law was in effect, it would not be a problem, but because the court has stayed the law that you all passed, but the old law does not exist, we find ourselves in a situation where municipalities have letters of credit that will expire, and if so, there's a potential for default. San Jose has nearly $100 million letter of credit that will expire in November. Both parties, the bank and San Jose, want to extend the letter of credit, but without a provision that is included in this bill, which does apply to all local government, provides all local government the same flexibility, there would be a huge problem. So we urge your support.
Any other witnesses wish to speak in favor? Please come forward.
We're actually in the middle category, Mr. Chair. We don't have an official position yet. Julie Snyder with Housing California. We would urge you to fix one glaring hole that we've identified in this bill, which is the finding that the agency must make in order to delay repayment of its housing funds that were used for the past CRAF payments. Specifically on page 14 of the bill, lines 11 to 13 allow delayed repayment if the agency makes a finding that there are, quote, insufficient other monies to accomplish currently planned activities and investments. The phrase currently planned activities and investments has no meaning. It's not defined in statute. Our read of it is honestly it's so broad as to be meaningless. It could cover any project that an agency claims it's planning, no matter how infeasible, unlikely, or undesirable that project is. Once the agency makes the finding, it will have 9 years to fully replenish its housing fund. This significant delay will come at the expense of Californians who are barely surviving on the streets or are paying 80% of their income for rent. These are the same people who've been negatively impacted by many of the other budget cuts you've had to make. We do support making a limited allowance for those redevelopment agencies that have a proven need to extend their repayments in order to opt into AB 27. However, other agencies shouldn't be given carte blanche to do the same. We would urge you to adopt an amendment that's actually currently being discussed in the Senate Budget Committee to allow delayed repayment only for those agencies who don't otherwise have enough money to meet their current commitments and to make the AB 27 payment. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional witnesses?
Brian Augusta on behalf of the California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. Concur with the remarks of Housing California. I just want to amplify a little bit. All we're looking for here, and this has been discussed in the other house, is tightening up this finding that would be the basis for extending the payments. We understand that some agencies are going to need to extend the payments. That we're sort of conceding that point on this bill. But what we're looking for is making sure that those who are able to make the payments in a timely manner do so we can get that money out on the streets, get some affordable housing built, and recover faster from the hit that the affordable housing funds are taking in the prior actions and in this bill. So for those reasons, we would just urge that minor amendment to tighten up those findings. Thank you.
Additional witness? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and members, Jason Gonsalves, we represent 50 cities throughout the state. While we think the bill and the cleanup is worthwhile, there are outstanding issues. There's CRAF obligations, much like what the legislature did for Richmond. There's about half a dozen to a dozen agencies throughout the state that haven't been cleaned up. There's military base issues. You're going to see a bill on Nellis. And then just the differing perspective to try to stave off these issues, I would suggest to the membership, if you take that language on the extension of the L&M repayment that our friends on the affordable housing side are asking for, each member will have agencies for some untold circumstances that will not get the 5-year extension, whereas other agencies will. And the unique circumstances, we took $1.7 billion in 09-10. The circumstances did change. We passed 26 and 27. We're now on the hook for another $1.7 billion with $500 million ongoing. That's the unique circumstances.
Great. Thank you. And I remind everyone and all the witnesses, this is the technical cleanup bill. It is not the only bill that will happen on this issue. There'll be a lot of bills that are going to move forward in the future around the redevelopment. But let's have the remaining witnesses try to be as brief as possible because we've exceeded our time, but I want to give everyone a fair say. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Michael Arnold, representing the City of Long Beach. Commenting on the comments from the witnesses about the language that is currently in the bill, the language that reads accomplish currently planned activities and investments. Representing the redevelopment side of the arguments, we also didn't like that language. That language was put in there to make sure that we showed something, okay? We feel that we ought to have the ability to have an additional 5 years to repay these loans. Anyway, let's look at what we're doing here. Basically, what happened is in 9-10, the legislature took $1.7 billion from redevelopment agencies. Then the next year, the legislature took $350 million. Then in 11-12, another $1.7 billion. Well, we're talking about the money that was taken in 9-10, the $1.7 billion. We took out loans in connection with that money to pay the $1.7 billion. We're talking about paying that money back. When we took out those loans, we had a stream of revenue, and what the legislature did was to cut that stream of revenue in half. So now the loans that we took out to repay the 910 hit are coming due, and we aren't going to be able to pay them. And so this language would merely allow us some flexibility to have another 5 years to make those payments. And the concept that you're going to make it harder, and when we make those findings, then have all these people take the agencies to court, it just, it's sort of ridiculous. I mean, the language that's in the bill now was worked out by the experts in redevelopment, and we think it works, and we hope you won't change it. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Greg DeShare, representing the ARC and United Cerebral Palsy, people with developmental disabilities and their families and service providers. For people with developmental disabilities, housing, affordable, accessible housing, is second only to the Lanterman Act itself in terms of their priorities and their needs. We support the amendment proposed by the housing groups because it will continue to allow agencies that really can't replenish the housing fund to do so, but won't open the floodgate to anybody who just chooses to do any agency just because they don't want to provide affordable housing. And without that amendment, we're concerned that as far as housing goes anyway, that this bill would do more harm than good.
Okay. Any additional witnesses? I guess we're still in support, but not on this issue. Okay. Any witnesses formally opposed? We've had some wobblers on this, but okay. Any comments or questions from members? Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. One additional witness.
Let finish your witness.
Okay, please go ahead. I didn't.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Members, Sam Miller, representing the Mayor, City Council, City of San Jose. You had heard from the representative of J.P. Morgan. I just want to amplify that issue in particular, and it's a question of the inability to extend letters of credit. The City of San Jose has, as example, and there are agencies all over the state that may well be in the similar position. Our letter of credit is scheduled to expire November 25th of this year. We would be unable to extend that or to negotiate any additional. What that will mean to us then, a $93 million debt would fall to the agency. The agency is certainly capable at this point of making debt service payments, but not in one lump sum, $93 million. So the disastrous effect would be it could become the obligation of the City of San Jose. We are not in a position, as you know, your local agencies in your various districts. This language in here addresses that issue and provides some clarification so we can move forward. Would ask for your support. It's not a carve-out just for San Jose. It would beneficially impact, we think, other entities, many of them in your district. We ask for your support. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Diane Stanton from the State Treasurer's Office. We are in support of this measure. The clarifying changes, we believe, specific to lines of credit and credit enhancement are narrow in scope, are not a carve-out for any one entity or another, and we believe it is a necessary and clarifying fix. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other witnesses I may have missed coming forward? No. Mr. Nielsen, thank you for pausing, and if you could continue.
You bet. Well, another no vote is warranted here, I believe. There's a provision here that, contrary to the former so-called reform, this will allow pay raises, reclassifications, and increasing of staff under extant labor agreements. That's an accelerator factor that should not be a part of this bill or this legislation. Further, it does not do anything to correct the long-term excesses of redevelopment, that being the designation of blight, eminent domain authority, and this obscene accrual of increments. This is not a fix that's worthy of a yes vote.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, but we have additional member comments. Mr. Dickinson, followed by Ms. Bonilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to do two things. First of all, I want to underscore a comment you made at the outset of the discussion of this bill, because I think it needs to be emphasized, and that this is not the end of the discussion that we're going to have regarding redevelopment and related activities, ultimately regardless of the outcome of the pending litigation. There's simply not time sufficient to deal with the breadth and depth of issues that have been raised in this hearing and in other discussions in the time frame that we have available to us. It doesn't mean they're not important. It doesn't mean that they will be ignored. It means that they deserve more time for discussion and resolution. Secondly, I think it's important to recognize that this bill and the next one thread the needle. They thread the needle between not prejudicing the ongoing litigation while also ensuring that we produce the amount of money necessary to satisfy the budget that we adopted and the governor signed earlier this summer. They also both bills thread the needle of the balance between allowing redevelopment agencies some measure of relief in the immediate time frame of this year when the burden on them is financially the greatest, while at the same time trying to do what we can to preserve meaningfully the opportunity to produce and construct affordable housing. None of these things are easily reconciled, but I think that this bill and the next one move us in the right direction, and I certainly support both of them.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Ms. Bonilla.
I understand that what we're dealing with today are issues of urgency around fixes that need to be made in an urgent manner. And I do want to reiterate what's already been said, and that is, though this is not the end of what we need to deal with in terms of addressing the issues around redevelopment. The base issue, the base reuse issue, is one that we see across the state impacting many different communities and having very grave economic impacts. It's very important that we keep that in our sights. That was discussed in the Senate. I believe they'll continue to have discussions on that. And I just want to make sure that that I want to state that very clearly because of the skepticism that's developed at the local level with some of the actions we have taken. That today is about urgency issues. We are not done. We must address the other issues that need to be fixed, and that we cannot lose the momentum in addressing those other issues.
Thank you. The bill has been Ms. Harkey.
I am very, very empathetic to the cities out there that have been placed under such burdens, not only with the BLF, but now with this. I would have supported an orderly dissolution of RDAs, but you can see that's not what's happened. There's going to be all sorts of problems on our cities and our counties because of the way this was crafted. It was a penalty play. It was a punishment. Because of Prop 22, I believe, and I really think that there are some good fixes here that need to be made, but there's other issues that I can't support. I'm going to probably just lay off this bill right now, but I wish you luck in trying to square away the situation in your cities as our state keeps grabbing down into your coffers. Thank you.
Thank you. This bill has been properly moved and seconded. It has a B roll call with Mr. Swanson voting no and a Republican roll call. We could have the clerk call Republican roll call.
Just Blumenfield?
Okay, we'll do a full roll call.
Nielsen?
Okay.
Nielsen, no. Berryhill? Harkey? Jeffries? Jones? Logue? Mansour? Mitchell? I'm sorry. Morrell? Nastandi? Valadeo? Wagner?
Okay, That bill is out. What's the total?
16, and I have 3 yes, no voting, and then 8 yes. I'm sorry, 16 ayes.
Okay, that bill is out with 16 aye votes. Next bill is SB 13. This is the RDA Hardship Relief Bill. As you know, as part of this year's budget, we adopted AB 26 and AB 27, which served to reform the redevelopment efforts in our state. The measures together resulted in a reduced but still substantial state commitment to redevelopment efforts at the local level. Under the program, communities make a remittance that benefits schools and some special districts based on their calculated share of the $1.7 billion. The first-year payment is substantial for some, and some communities that might benefit from redevelopment activities and wish to participate are unable to be given financial constraints. This bill provides a mechanism for communities to appeal for relief in their remittance payments upon appeal to the Director of Finance. The relief appeal would contain evidence that the RDA's increment is unable to support the payment, the community is experiencing fiscal stress and unable to provide additional funds, and the area is in unusual economic difficulties. Any relief granted would have an impact on the $1.7 billion that was scored in the 2011-2012 budget, and thus each appeal would be reviewed and a determination would have to be made by the Director of Finance. So ultimately, while we're creating these hardships opportunities, it really is still a discretionary action by the Department of Finance. With that, Department of Finance, your comments.
Sure. Notwithstanding the authority for the Director of Finance, the Department is opposed to this for the same reason as the prior bill in terms of the pending litigation in front of the Supreme Court.
Okay. The bill's been moved and properly seconded. Are there any witnesses who wish to speak in support? Seeing none, are there any witnesses that wish to speak in opposition? Seeing none, Mr. Jeffries has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this issue up at this time. With the SRA tax not being considered earlier, this is the only venue that's available. Mr. Chair, I would move to amend SB 13X to add language to repeal the SRA fire tax fee. I have the proposed amendments. They have been distributed in print to all the members and would ask for approval of this amendment.
I second.
Okay. Well, we're on the redevelopment bill at the moment.
I'm aware of that, sir, and I appreciate your consideration. This is the only venue we have. The actual bill to repeal the SRA tax was not granted a hearing in special session, and this is the only opportunity we have to put a stake in it, as it were.
Okay. Okay. We're going to move back to appreciate the comments, and we're going to move back to the bill at hand.
It wasn't a comment, it was a motion, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we have a motion and a second. I request that we have a roll call vote on the motion and the seconded motion.
Before we do that,
we have a second.
I'm going to ask table this motion. Ask for a roll call vote on tabling the motion. It's been moved to table and seconded. Clerk, would you call the roll? The motion is on tabling the proposed amendments.
Blumenfield?
Aye.
Blumenfield, aye. Nielsen?
No.
No. Alejo? Alejo, aye. Ellen? Ellen, aye. Berryhill? No. Berryhill, no. Bonilla? Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Buchanan? Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Cedillo? Chesbro? Dickinson?
Aye.
Dickinson, aye. Fior? Fior, aye. Gordon? Gordon, aye. Harkey?
No.
Huffman?
No.
Huffman, no. Jeffries?
No.
Jeffries, no. Jones? No. Jones, no. Loeb? No. Mansour? Mansour, no. Mitchell? Aye. Mitchell, aye. Monning?
Aye.
Monning, aye. Morrell? Morrell, no. Nastandi? No. Nastandi, no. Swanson?
Swanson.
Valadeo?
Aye.
No. Wagner? No. Wagner, no. 11. That's not. There's a couple of people missing or not voting. Swanson, aye. Okay, so that's 12.
Remind members, it's a procedural vote to table the amendment.
So 12, 11.
Yes. Bonilla is an aye.
Bonilla's an aye. So that's 13.
Okay. That motion is tabled. Is that correct? Oh, that's true. And on a procedural, thank you. On a procedural matter, it's a majority of those voting and present. This motion has been tabled. We're going to move back to the redevelopment bill. Are there any? We were taking member comments on the redevelopment bill. The bill has been properly moved and seconded. Oh, Mr. Alejo has a comment.
I just wanted to add a quick comment. I had my reservations of the bills that were passed on redevelopment, but nonetheless, there are communities, cities that are having are facing a very difficult situation. City of San Jose, as mentioned earlier, is one of those. There's others that are on the brink of being in a similar situation. I think it's our obligation and our responsibility to provide that language to help them out with this hardship language. This court decision is on an expedited schedule. We're going to get a court decision in December, if not early January. Well, certainly, this is a beginning of the work that has to be done on this. We'll be revisiting these issues again early next year after the court decision. But nonetheless, these communities need these changes in statute now, and I ask for an aye vote on the bill.
Thank you. Without any further questions or comments from members, this will be a Republican roll call vote, and it's a B roll call with Mr. Swanson voting no on the Democratic side. So we could have a Republican roll call.
Nielsen, Berryhill, Harkey, Jeffries. I'm sorry.
That was an aye.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Even without the amendments.
Jones. Aye. Logue. Mansour. Morel. Nastandi. Valadeo. Wagner. Okay. So we have 3 ayes, 3 noes, and
What's
6
that?
not voting.
The total number of yeses?
So we have a total of, sorry, 16, 17, 18, 19 ayes, 3 noes.
19 ayes, that bill is out. We're now moving to the final trailer bill, which is the SB 18 Education. This bill makes small technical changes to the K through 12 and community college provisions necessary to implement the 2011-2012 budget. Hopefully this one will not be controversial. Specifically, what this bill does is the following. It amends provisions of the education budget trailer bill relating to the community college deferral amounts identified in Section 41 of Chapter 7 of the statutes of 2011. And it's to be applied beginning in the 2011-2012 fiscal year and corrects a drafting error in order to authorize payment of the 2010-2011 deferral and make that paid in 2011-2012. It also amends an item of the Budget Act 6110-488 to add $23.8 million in one-time Proposition 98 savings to replace the $23.8 million in other one-time savings that are not available for reappropriation in the 2011-2012 fiscal year. This budget item reappropriates one-time Proposition 98 funds for several education programs in order to achieve savings in the 2011-2012 budget. And finally, it adds education code provisions to clarify that school districts can continue to receive necessary small schools or NSS funding grants for middle and junior high schools, as well as elementary and high schools in 2011-2012. These changes authorize school districts that counted grades 7 and 8 student average daily attendance and instructors for purposes of receiving these grants to account for them. This bill, SB 18, was amended yesterday to clarify that if the budget trigger is operative, that May 1, 2012 is the new operative date of the $36 per unit community college fee level and the operative date of the $10 per unit increase. With that, Department of Finance, do you have any comments or questions or, comments or additions?
Nothing much to add. The community college issue is the same one we discussed earlier. The other issues are basically technical.
Okay. Any witnesses wish to come and speak in favor of this bill? Seeing none, any witnesses in opposition? Bill has been moved and seconded. And Mr. Nielsen has a comment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This bill does nothing to address some of the egregious excesses that were contained in the education budget trailer bill before, particularly the onerous provision that ties the hands of the school boards and their governance in any reductions. And I am very dismayed that no one from the California State School Boards Association or AXA are here to testify against that exclusion from this bill. This is it's a mess, and that's why these bills have required so many cleanups again and again and again. This one does not help. As a matter of fact, it actually goes even further. It requires that for fee increases, the community colleges are encouraged pursuant to this to implement reductions in a manner that minimizes the impact on basic skills, workforce training, transfer courses, indicates the reductions are one-time in nature. So this is no long-term budget fix or any reform whatsoever. And again, though those be noble goals, it ties the hands of the community college trustees and management.
Bill has been properly moved and seconded. Seeing no other member comments, this will be a Democratic B roll call and a Republican roll call, please. Or it will be a B vote on the Democratic side. The Democrats are up on this. Republican roll call, please.
Yeah, we're all no.
You're all no. Okay, then it's straight out this B. I thought you were asking for a roll call vote. That's fine. So that bill is out. A couple of quick things here. I want to make sure everyone realizes that the Senate passed bills AB 16, AB 17, and AB 32 that are equivalent to the bills that we passed, SB 4, SB 5, and SB 18. So the bills that we passed, the content of those bills are identical, and the question of which ones we take up on the floor will be determined. We'll probably end up taking up the bills that the Senate moved, but just to make it absolutely clear that the content of what we just discussed is the identical content on those three bills. Thank you very much for participating in this hearing on these trailer cleanup bills, and there certainly will be additional changes on all of these issues. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.